Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Thunderous Logan here, and in this video we're going to be speed testing the Aperture vehicle in Jailbreak. So I did get this vehicle for, how much was it? I believe $899,000 I got this vehicle for, which is, a little bit pricey, and, I also want to determine how fast this vehicle is, so, we are joined by, with Nightmare here today, and he's going to be assisting us in the speed test, so... yeah, I want to find out how fast the Aperture is. I want to know if my $899,000 was worth on this vehicle. And I have noticed that this vehicle is pretty fast, so yeah, we definitely do have a lot of more faster vehicles that are going to speed testing today. That's also why we're starting here instead of like at the prison. But yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and get to it. I also need to give myself a the force field launcher. Nightmare, I'm sure you know how this works by now. When the shield disappears, and that's when you go, so yeah. But anyway, for the first race, we have the Aperture up against the Macron. Okay, Aperture wins, and okay, you're still pretty far back there, so it seems like Aperture won by a long shot, but yeah, I don't know if that's going to be the case every time, though. We'll just have to wait and see the top's at 240. Oh, the Macron? Interesting, alright. Let's go ahead and move on. Okay, next up here we have the Aperture up against the Airtail. Okay, Aperture wins once again. You were like a little bit far behind. Well, okay. It's not a good time for the train to be here. You're getting in my way. Yeah, get out of here, train. But yeah, anyway, let's go ahead and move on. Okay, so next up here we have the Aperture up against the Molten 12, but I actually have to drive the Molten 12, and Nightmare's going to drive the Aperture because he actually doesn't own the Molten 12 currently. But yeah, let's do it. Okay, so looks like the Aperture has won once again, so yeah, I was a little bit behind there, but yeah, let's go ahead and move on. Okay, so next up here we have the Aperture up against the Bagnet, and Nightmare doesn't own the Bagnet either, so I'm also going to be driving the Bagnet. Okay, Aperture has won once again. It doesn't seem like by too much though. Benya was just a little bit behind there, but yeah, let's go ahead and move on. Okay, next up here we have the Aperture up against the Eclair. Alright, so I have a few comments on that. So it seems like the Aperture, it has much faster acceleration and stays past the Eclair for a while, and then it seems like that the Eclair eventually catches up, but then like towards the end there I did observe that like the Eclair was still in front of the Aperture, but they seem to have they seem to keep like a very similar speed. So it's like Aperture at first is ahead of the Eclair, then the Eclair eventually catches up and gets a little bit past the Aperture, and then like towards the end, it seems like their top speed is very similar. And I said the one time I was doing that at 275. Okay, yeah, I was doing about 260. So yeah, it seems to have very similar top speed, like I said. But yeah, let's go ahead and move on. Okay, next up here we have the Aperture up against the Parisian. Okay, so it seems like the Aperture won, but I did observe that the Parisian was catching up. Nightmare, were you like catching up? I was ahead on my screen. Oh, you were ahead on your screen. Okay. On my screen, it showed that like you were catching up, but I did also like lose speed a little bit on one of the turns, so that could have been why. But it seems like the Aperture like stays ahead of the Parisian for like a very long time, and then it seems like the Parisian also catches up to the Aperture because it has like a little bit higher top speed, I guess, but that takes a while for it to do, as it seems. But yeah, it was straight to 300 plus, I see, okay. But yeah, let's go ahead and move on. Okay, next up here we have the Aperture up against the Roadster. Oh yeah, the rain. Alright, so it seems like the Roadster has a bit faster acceleration, but the Aperture relatively quickly gets past the Roadster because the Aperture also has a pretty good acceleration, and its top speed is faster than the Roadster, so yeah, it seems like the only advantage the Roadster has is like just a little bit fast acceleration. Aperture seems to trump basically everything else, but yeah, let's go ahead and move on. Okay, next up here we have the Aperture up against a Volt Bike. Okay, so similar to the Roadster, the Volt Bike has a really good acceleration. It's like it's probably like one of the best. It's probably one of the best accelerating vehicles in the entire game, and it actually did stay past the Aperture for a little bit there. But the Aperture has much higher top speed, and it was after some time was able to get past the Volt Bike. So yeah, let's go ahead and move on. Okay, next up here we have the Aperture up against the Concept. Okay, so it seems like that the Aperture has a quite faster acceleration than Concept, but then after a little bit the Concept eventually catches up to the Aperture because it has a quite higher top speed. So yeah, let's go ahead and move on. Okay, so next up here we have the Aperture up against the Bruley. Okay, so it seems like the did you crash? Or I mean, you know what? That's good enough. I think we got the data that we needed there. Okay, so the Aperture actually won, but if that track was just going for like a little bit longer, then the Broly would have actually won because, like Nightmare said, you know, he was doing 305 miles per hour in the Broly, so yeah, it does seem like that the Aperture like accelerates a lot faster than the Broly, and the Broly does have like pretty insane top speed, but it takes quite a long time for it to get there. So like literally, like unless you're like driving the Aperture and the Broly on like just that one track, then Aperture is probably going to get you to point A and to point B a lot faster. But yeah, let's go ahead and move on. Okay, next up here we have the Aperture up against the Javelin. Okay, so I know you did crash there, but you would have won if you didn't crash. So you know, I think we got enough data there. So it seems like that the Aperture it does accelerate a lot faster than the Javelin. Obviously, I'm sure you saw. And the Aperture actually stays ahead of the Javelin for quite some time, but then after a little while, the Javelin eventually catches up. But yeah, let's go ahead and move on. And last but definitely not least, we have the Aperture up against the Torpedo. Okay, so similar to the Javelin, the Aperture does stay ahead of the Torpedo for quite some time, but then after some time, the Torpedo does eventually catch up to the Aperture. So Aperture does have quite faster acceleration, but the Torpedo has higher top speed, but it does take a little while for the Torpedo to catch up to the Aperture though. But yeah, that is going to be it for this speed test video. So Nightmare, what do you think about the speed of the Aperture here?
I honestly think that it's a very overpowered vehicle in my opinion when it comes to performance. It could definitely be very valuable in trading, mainly because of its very nice appeal to grinders and traders. It looks very nice. It's very fast and it handles pretty well too. It competes pretty well with the Chiron and Roadster, and even some of the high tier cars like Torpedo and Javelin. For its cost, it's actually not too bad. Other than the Eclair, of course. The Eclair is actually pretty quick.
But yeah, you heard what he said, and I pretty much agree with all of that. It does seem like that the Aperture is definitely top tier car, and it basically accelerates faster than everything except for the Roadster and Volt Bike as far as I know. And even the fastest vehicles in the game like the Torpedo, they are faster than the Aperture in top speed, but it takes quite a bit of time for it to catch up to the Aperture. So like, if you're trying to get away or just get somewhere faster, like chasing a criminal, then, or like, you know, if you're on the power plant trying to get back to the base fast, you know, just trying to get somewhere quickly, the Aperture I would highly recommend for that. It is a little bit pricey at $899,000, and let's actually go over here real quick. Okay, well unfortunately the Aperture is no longer available to buy at the time of making this video, but you can still get it in trading. I do think it's going to be a pretty highly valued though, but yeah, definitely do recommend the car, like if you're, you know, a grinder or just if you're trying to, get to places fast. And yeah, I would definitely recommend this car for that. But yeah, that is going to be it for this video. So if you did find this video helpful and entertaining, be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to subscribe if this is your first time to see me, or if you have not yet already, that really help me out and can always change mine later. And be sure to turn on notifications so that way you don't miss out on any new uploads or any other content I post here on the channel. But yeah, that is going to be it, and I will see you all in the next video.